Thank you so much, and welcome to everyone. And thank you to Triton for organizing this, especially Tina Lilly. This is a great event. It's very exciting. I'm so happy to be here. You said everything about me. I am a school board member at Ridgewood High School. Very proud of that, District 234. And Triton, my whole family went to Triton College. It's a great place, and it's just so great to be back here. I'd like to say something in Italian. It's not to, I hope you understand. Quando ero uno studente qui, ma tanti anni fa, studiavo l'italiano con il grande professore Antonio Armagno, e mi ricordo benissimo la sua classe, è stato sempre un bel ricordo per me. Okay, I just talked about, there was a teacher, an Italian teacher, Antonio Armagno. He was a great, great guy, and it was just great memories, and unfortunately it was like 38, 39 years ago, which is just tough to say, I know, out loud, but it's reality. Being that this is Italian Heritage Month, I'd like to just highlight just a few great Italian Americans. A man named A.P. Giannini, Amadeo Pietro Giannini. He started the Bank of Italy, which became Bank of America, the current Bank of America. He's responsible for numerous modern banking practices. Just a couple, he started branch banking. And he also started loaning money to the middle class when in those days, it was the early 1900s, basically only the rich were able to borrow money and get farther ahead. Ella Grasso was the first woman elected to be a governor in the United States. I believe it was 75 to 80 in Connecticut. Something closer to home, Radio Flyer, the little red wagon, was started, the company, by an Italian immigrant, Antonio Passin. I want to say it was 1917, 1918. They are still in Chicago. It's run by his grandson. It's sold all over the world. I mean, what a success story. Much more local is a woman named Helen Chedese, who grew up in Oak Park, nearby Oak Park, feeds into Triton, and she was a daughter of Italian immigrants, first woman in Illinois to receive a law license. In fact, she had to wait to be 21 to receive it. She was that young. Another lady, Carolina Laraya, who's better known, her stage name, she's an actress, Carol Lawrence, from nearby Melrose Park, was an actress. She played the part of Maria in the first ever production of West Side Story. And these two ladies and many more are going to be featured. I'm a part of the Casa Italia Library in Stone Park, and we are putting together a Italian Women in Chicago book, part 2. And those are a couple of the ladies that are going to be in the book as well. So let's meet our panel now. We'll start with Maryann Pisano, who is a staff writer here at Triton College, the author of Caterina's Journey and the Decision, and she is a school board member for Rhodes School District 84 and a half. So, Maryann, thank you for being here. First of all, as we will do with everyone, where is the family from in Italy?
My mom's family is from Calabria. They're from Reggio di Calabria and San Fernando. And my dad's family is from Sicily. They were from Termini. So it's like right outside of Palermo.
Okay, Termini Imerese, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Beautiful. And have you ever been there?
I haven't, but my goal is to go there for my honeymoon next year.
For next year, you're getting married. All right, congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
That would be an awesome choice.
That
would
is
really
my goal.
be. Is your fiance an Italian American as well?
Yes, he was born in Mola.
He was born in Mola di Bari.
He has family there, so we're hoping to go and visit and see his family and do all the touristy things too.
Then you definitely should do that. Yes. Tell us about. So you wrote this book, Caterina's Journey. It's about family. Tell us about how this all started, how you come to write it, and what it is exactly about.
So Caterina's Journey is the story of my grandmother's immigration story. My grandma came here. She was born in Reggio di Calabria, and she came here as a little girl, and she came here on a boat, and it's just your typical immigration story. And I wrote this story because I really wanted her legacy to live on. And I wrote this story about 7 or 8 years ago, and I got it published. And I've just absolutely loved telling her story to this next generation who really don't know a lot about the Italian immigration story. A lot of our grandparents' immigration stories have been forgotten or haven't been told. So that's why it's so important to me, and that's why I really like talking about it.
Was your grandmother alive when you started writing this book?
She wasn't. My grandma died when I was in kindergarten. So I wrote this story when I was in my 20s, and she actually did not get to read it, or any of her brothers or sisters didn't get to read it. But I'm hoping that the story just speaks for itself and her legacy can live on.
Did you kind of rely on maybe mom or dad for information? Facts?
I did. Actually, her brother, which is my great uncle, he passed away when I was in high school, and he actually was the one who told me Caterina's journey. So in the book, he's Giuseppe, and so Giuseppe told me this story, and that's how. And I remembered it from when I was a little girl, and I never forgot it, and it really influenced me a lot.
And that's wonderful. And I believe the book is over on the table to my right, your left.
It is,
as
yes.
well as on the bookcase over by Miss Tina Lilly. There you go. Thank you. Also, tell us about, you have an online magazine. You do some interviews. Tell us a little about that as well.
I do. When I first graduated from college, it was really hard to find a job in journalism, and so I decided to start my own online magazine. And I started out doing like a lot of fun things like fashion, beauty, like celebrity gossip, and then I started to do a lot more serious things. I started doing a lot of cool interviews with Adriana Trigiani, who is an Italian-American author that we both know and love, and I've done interviews with Ryan Cheverini, another really cool Italian-American, and I've interviewed like Olympic gold medalists and just really different, cool, interesting people. So it was kind of like my little baby, and it kind of grew bigger than I thought it would be.
And you're still doing this as well, right?
I do, yes.
And what's the name of the online publication?
It's called M Magazine.
M Magazine.
Yes.
Okay, great. Anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
I'm really passionate about my Italian heritage. Everyone that knows me, that I write about Italian Americans, and I write stories about Italian Americans, and just being here today really means a lot to me.
Well, thank you for being here. That was excellent. Thank you. Next up, we have Katie Rullo, who is an Associate Dean of Continuing Education here at Triton College. Katie, welcome. And you have a very interesting story. So where is your family from in Italy?
Salerno by Naples. So my great-grandfather came here with his 7 children. So they were the ones that we had to reference all of our family traditions from.
And your husband is an Italian-American as well?
My husband is 100% Italian with blonde hair and blue eyes. So I actually am half Irish, and a little bit of Swedish. So I actually look like the Italian one in the relationship, but not the case at home. So.
Okay, so you told me about a trip to Italy about 6 years ago. It was your first trip. Tell us about that.
So, like Maryann, I got married in 2017, and we actually took our honeymoon there. We spent 12 days. We were in Venice. We then went to Florence. We were able to visit Tuscany and the countryside, did a loop around to Pisa, San Giamo, and then we were able to visit Rome. It was a unique trip for me because I had different thoughts going there. It's very relaxed. It's very laid back. They have a siesta halfway through the day. Everything closed down. I said, what are we going to do for an hour? Go take a nap, have a coffee. Everything was differently priced, and the dishes were so fresh, and the food. We actually got sick when we came home for a week because everything was just so fresh out there. And it was great just seeing the countryside and doing things that we didn't do. I loved the spots that weren't filled with tourists. So it's great you read about all these amazing things in these books and the history that comes with being an Italian American. But when you get there, it's just such a pleasure to walk around and see everything. So.
Had your husband ever been there?
No, it was a first trip for both of us. And he was amazed at, if you go to Caputo's and you get a pound of prosciutto, it's about $20 to $25 that you're taking home. There, it was about $5. So I think his face dropped when he asked the lady, how much money do I owe you? And we walked around for a pound of prosciutto at least a couple times a day. So lunch meat for those of you that don't know.
So prior to going, what was your thoughts of like what you would encounter there? Is that what you encountered? What prior to going? What did you think you were going to see there? And
One thing that made me really nervous was the language barrier. I wasn't sure. I can pick up on words. My family does. Some of my family speaks fluent Italian, but it was hard for me to picture myself going there not being able to communicate. And when I was there, everybody spoke English. So it was very at home. I felt comfortable. I was able to navigate through. And everybody was so friendly and laid back, like, maybe because they take siestas and have a break throughout the day. So it's probably why.
plans to go back?
Oh, yes. I'm planning to go back. He would love to go back maybe for a 40th. So
40th?
when we turn 40, sorry.
Oh, when you turn 40. I thought you
Not
meant your 40th
anniversary.
wedding
No, no,
anniversary. I was
no.
going to say you could go before then.
But I would, places to visit though, I would definitely stay more in the countryside and more of those smaller towns. It was great to see Rome and the Colosseum and everything, but I really like those small niched little areas that you can really get into the tradition and go to a winery and try the cheese and meet a family that farms their own good products. So
They have a lot of that out there. And it sounds like you went to the north, so maybe next time you go to the south. Beautiful. Well, that's excellent. Okay, next up, Mr. Peter Volpe, President of Wintrust Bank Chicago, Norridge, Mont Clare, Casa Italia board member for Elmwood Park Community Unit School District 401, Triton College alum, former president of Colombian Club, correct? Former chairman at Casa Italia. Stop me.
Yeah, that's about it.
Oh, is that? That's
I'm
enough.
like,
That's
yeah,
enough.
That's enough.
Well,
No.
Peter, thank you for being here. You obviously are incredibly involved with the Italian community. You tell me what you would like to tell me about some of your experiences.
I guess I was very lucky. I grew up in a home where there was an in-law apartment upstairs, and my grandparents lived up there. They actually owned the home. My folks didn't have a lot, and my grandparents had the home, and we lived downstairs from them. And so I had two sets of parents. I had the really cool parents upstairs that all they did was feed me and let me get away with murder, and the parents downstairs that worked a 9 to 5. And so I was really lucky to grow up in that environment. And I hung around my grandfather quite a bit, my grandpa Sam. And it was just a great way to grow up. And I really got to learn about his background and his journey here to the United States.
That's a very fortunate thing, and we try to tell our grandkids, talk to their grandparents, and sometimes they don't want to, and sometimes they're too busy with their own stuff, but those are treasures, and if they understood, they would take advantage because one day it won't be there. But tell us about Colombian Club. What is the Colombian Club?
The Colombian Club of Chicago was formed in 1939 by a group of Italian businessmen, and it's a charitable organization. We raise money for scholarship and other worthy causes. We limit ourselves to 100 members, no more than 5 in one profession. And we go out there, we have a great time, we raise some great money, and probably on an annual basis, we donate anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 a year to those in need.
And since you are former chairman of Casa Italia, current board member,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the local Casa Italia, which is in Stone Park, which is like the Italian Community Center.
Casa Italia is really something that many people don't know about. We sit on 18 acres in Stone Park. It was an old monastery, if I remember correctly, or seminary.
Seminary, yes.
Seminary. Funny story, my dad was actually there to be a priest. But he had the horns on him like I did, and he got kicked out. Otherwise I wouldn't be here today. But we'd go there as a kid to different festivals they would have, and my dad would tell me about it. And when I had the opportunity to get involved with Casa Italia, I jumped on it. And just a worthy cause. There's about 6 or 7 museums that sit on our grounds, a great library, and just walking those grounds and looking at everything, it just makes you just not want to leave. It's just a great place that's underutilized because we're in the middle of a neighborhood, but you really all should get out there and tour the grounds and the libraries. It's time well spent.
And like Peter says, the library is vast. We have like 10,000 pieces? Volumes. Thank you, young man in the green. 10,000 volumes. That is Ross. He is a volunteer at the Casa Italia Library, so he would know. And his mother was an Italian teacher here at Triton College. Yes, 10,000 volumes. We have music, records, we have tapes, we have DVDs, VHS, we have published books about, well, like I said, we're doing Italian Women in Chicago Part 2, Reconstructing Italians. We help people, this is a big one, we help people to write their own story, their own family story. Our curator there always preaches, write your story. We can help you to get it published free of charge. And this is something that will be brought down to each generation. It's a great thing to leave the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, and so on. So definitely come visit us. The volunteers at the library, we're there every Wednesday. You can come there any day, though, as well.
But I'm going to stop you because
Yes.
you didn't ask me where my family's from in Italy.
I didn't.
So
Wow, this job is not easy.
and
Okay.
You know what? You can't get away with that, all right?
Okay, definitely,
You want to know why?
please.
I'm Sicilian.
You're Sicilian.
Okay?
Okay.
So my grandfather was from a little town, Porticello, which is outside of Palermo. My grandmother on my mother's side was from Corleone.
Okay.
Red hair and blue eyes with freckles. Dig that, right? My dad's father was from Agrigento, and my dad's mother was from Bari.
Oh, okay.
But we don't talk about that much.
Okay.
Okay?
So 3/4 Sicilian, 25%.
Yeah, and the coolest story I'll give, and I've got a million stories, I'll keep it brief. I always knew about Porticello and the stories my grandfather would tell me, and he passed away 40 years ago. And so once the internet got up and running and everything was going, I started to write to people in Porticello. Their last name was Tarantino, which is like Smith here. And so I kept writing, asking if anybody knew Salvatore Tarantino, and I gave a brief history about when he was born in 1899. And so I wrote to a gentleman named Salvatore, and he's an attorney, young guy, maybe 40 years old. And he says, yeah, I think we're related, send me a picture. So I sent him a photograph of my grandparents. He goes, yeah, we're related, tell me if you know this guy. It was my picture from 1975 when I graduated grade school. My grandfather's niece still had it in her wallet because my grandfather would mail them letters once a year. So I did fulfill my dream probably about 15 years ago, and I visited them, and I got to meet them, and they were very cold, distant. So they gave me this tour begrudgingly, and I got to see the bedroom he was born in because they still had the home. And his one niece, or his two nieces there, and neither spoke any English, and I don't speak Italian. But that niece learned how to say something to me. She goes, you know, I bought this house from your grandfather. And I said, no, ma'am, you didn't. My grandfather was so grateful that you took care of his brother, he signed the house over to you because he felt you deserved it. All of a sudden, a big smile came on their face, and they welcomed me. They thought I was there to claim the house. Because that's all they have there. You know, it's a very poor island. You know, about 30% unemployment. It's very sad. And then 20 cousins all came out of the woodworks and welcomed me. So it was a great experience, and I could fill up this day with stories, and I'll stop, okay? But I could just tell you this, I'm just so proud to be Italian. I've always been. I'll never put down another nationality. I think everybody should have the equal amount of pride in who they are and where they came from. But I really think it's important to perpetuate our culture generationally because we're getting further and further away from it, and people are forgetting where they came from. And I got home last night at 9 o'clock at night from Italy. Okay? So it was a lot of fun.
I agree with Peter. It definitely, and you know, I always think to myself, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So if we don't put forth this effort and this, call it work, but it's a labor of love, no one's going to do it. So it's kind of our responsibility and our duty. Okay, very, very good. Thank you. Thank you. So next we have Mr. Tony Renelli, who is a Triton College Operations and Maintenance Department. Tony, welcome.
Thank you.
Where is your family from in Italy?
Suburb of Naples, Acera.
Acera.
Funny story, too. My grandmother and grandfather were from there. I was working at Sears as a buyer, and I met this girl there. And of all the companies and all the cities and all the world, she walks into mine. You know where that's from, right? Casablanca, 1942. And she was from the same town as my grandparents.
And let me guess, that's the girl you married.
That's the one.
Wow. Wow. You can't make this up, ladies and gentlemen.
Can't make that up, right.
That's beautiful. Beautiful story. Have you been to Italy?
No, I've never been.
No? Okay, that's very disappointing. And your wife is from there?
Never could find the time. My wife has been back. All my kids have been back.
Okay.
I've never been back.
You have to go. You have to go.
If I can find the time.
Find it. Find it. You know what I always say to somebody who has never been there? Every Italian American should visit once. And at the very least, go to Rome and go to the family's town. That's all. Even if it's a week. If you go off season, it's very cheap. Very cheap to go. So, you have lived your entire life in a very prominent Italian American neighborhoods.
Well,
Tell us a little bit about that.
Lived in two. I was born in Chicago, Little Italy, Cabrini and Racine Streets, in Mother Cabrini Hospital. And my grandparents owned the building that the Rosebud Cafe is in. Has anybody ever eaten there on Taylor and Laughlin? Well, they had that building, and they used to have a spaghetti store and a delicatessen where they hung the regular stuff, the olive oil, the provolone in the window. And then as I got older, we moved to the northwest side of Chicago. And for you Google Maps people, that's like 6,800 west and 2,500 north. And I lived on a street called Sayre, which I found out you also lived for a while.
Was born on, yes.
Crazy street, fabulous street, famous and infamous people lived on that street. I lived on a corner. I lived in the middle of a block where on the corner there was a church. And 3 houses down on the south, there was a famous chef, cook, and author, Mama D. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. Any of people related to Mama D here? Raise your hand.
Relatives of Mama D, raise your
Very
hands
good.
with pride.
Very good. And that was Jenny DiAugustino, and she was pretty famous at the time. She wrote several books. You go down a couple blocks, and then you wind up with an actress's family. Her name was Kim Novak. I don't know if you ever heard of her. She was big in the 50s and 60s. And her parents lived on Sayre, just a few blocks away.
She was in the famous movie with
She was in many movies.
Hitchcock's.
Yeah, many movies.
With Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
What was that? Anybody? Rear Window. Thank
Rear
you.
Window.
Thank you. Smart audience. Like it.
Okay. I think Rear Window was Grace Kelly. I don't think that was the one, right? No?
Maybe it was it Vertigo as well?
Vertigo she was in.
Okay.
Anyway, that's not here or there. But if you go a couple blocks south on Sayre, you run into a guy by the name of Mad Sam DiStefano. Now, this guy was a hitman, Italian, but what are you going to do? I said infamous and famous. And he was a hitman, and he got hit in his own garage, actually, by a friend of his, which is named Tony Spilotro. And Tony and Michael had a bar 2 blocks south of them. It was called Hoagie's. It's on North Avenue and Sayre. To get away from these guys, 3 blocks east, there was a famous guy by the name of Hugh Hefner. His family lived there. He grew up in that area. Growing up in mostly Italian areas, I never felt a minority. I don't know what it feels like to be a minority because everybody was the same. I never even knew about other nationalities pretty much until I got to high school, but even there, I went to River Grove High School, Holy Cross, and there was at least 50% Italians there, of which Colleen's dad was one. He was a friend. So all my life, I've been in Italian neighborhoods. I feel very grateful because it kept up their traditions. My children are very traditional because of where I grew up and because I carried the traditions. In 1999, my youngest daughter was in the court in the Columbus Day Parade downtown. The area itself, I still see many of the people there. A couple of people today I went to grammar school with are here today. The friendships I made there lasted a lifetime. And I think that's about the best thing. I'd also like to thank, the Heritage Committee and the Professional Development Committee that invited me to speak today. I feel honored to speak with this dais. They're very famous people, very nice people, and they're Italian. What more can I say? No more explanation needed.
Well, thank you. And I mean, that neighborhood stuff was beautiful stuff. realistically, unfortunately, it's not as
it's the good and the bad.
prevalent.
I mean, that's the reality of life.
Yeah.
Not everything is good. But, I mean, they were infamous people. They did live in the area. They did give it some history. And you moved away before all that history started.
Yeah. Touching back on something Peter said, I was trying to remember, you had the relative with the red hair and the blue eyes.
Yeah, my great-grandma.
Okay.
Great-grandma, yeah.
Remember this, people. Not everybody is 5 foot and dark hair and dark eyes. When people say that, they're not, they don't understand, okay? Italy is full of blondes, redheads, very tall, kind of tall, just tall. It's not like that, okay? It's unfortunate that, you still continue to have that thoughts from people, and, it's just, I'm glad you brought that up.
But it is Corleone, and that's a little unusual for there.
Well, you would think in Sicily that it was, but it just shows you.
It's the invasions.
She was from Sicily. I mean, they exist, all different kinds of people. So, well, thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Colleen Rockafellow. When I first saw it, I got excited. I thought it was a Rockefeller, but
everybody says that.
Who is the Associate Vice President of Business Operations at Triton College.
Yes, sir.
Colleen, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Where is your family from in Italy?
So my maiden name is Mizuka, for those of you who don't know me, and I am the testament to the blonde hair, blue eyes, right? And I swear I'm Italian. I can be up here. So my family is actually from Calabria. So my great-great-grandfather, he came to America back in 1888, but our family is from Calabria and from a small town called Flavetto.
Okay, and I mean, not to put you on the spot, but do you know, like, what area of Calabria?
Yeah, actually,
you
I
do?
wrote it
Good.
down. Yeah, so let me see. I actually wrote some notes down. So it was actually a mountain village in Calabria, and yeah, in the small town, it was like the province called Flavetto. So that's
Okay.
what I was able to find out from a little family history.
Okay, no, that's great. And did you, have you been there to Italy?
So no, I have not been to Italy, and it's probably one of the biggest regrets I have. And when I get to my other story about my brother, you're going to understand why this is one of my biggest regrets.
Knowing that story, I'm surprised, but that's okay. Would you like to go with brother's story or no?
Yeah, you know
Brother.
what? Why don't I share the story with my brother? Because this is a really unique story. So my brother, his name is Joe Mizuka. We grew up in Elmwood Park, and baseball has been his life. And so he played at Holy Cross High School. He went to college. He was recruited, and he was drafted by the Florida Marlins. So my brother played professional baseball. Amazing. Well, when you play professional baseball, after a while, if you don't go up to the majors and you're in the minors for a long time, you have to come to that decision of, is this something for me? So my brother Joe decided to quit, leave the major leagues and started playing baseball in an independent league. So you would think this is a scam when somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I'm going to give you a ticket to Italy and I want you to play baseball in Italy. And my brother Joe was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, I'm an Italian scout. I see your last name is Mizuka. You have Italian roots, so I want you to come to Italy. So my brother Joe comes to the family, and we're like, a guy offering you a plane ticket? Come on, no. Sat down with him again, and he said, listen, I'm an Italian scout. I want you to come and play baseball in Italy. Showed him the plane ticket. My brother went to Italy. Long story short, 10 years my brother played Italian baseball for Team Italy. He traveled all around the world. He speaks fluent Italian. He had an Italian girlfriend. We thought he was going to marry her. That didn't work out. But that's another story. But it was so unique because I would tell so many people that, again, my brother is an Italian baseball player. And they're like, Colleen, do you mean soccer? Do you mean football? And I'm like, no, listen, I know sports. It's baseball. And so getting back to Frank's question about have I ever been to Italy, such a regret of mine because he lived there for 10 years. So he would he would play 6 months baseball in Italy, and then he would come home for 6 months. And, again, that whole story of...
You really missed the boat
Oh,
there.
my God.
You should have gone to see him, because he could have taken you
I
everywhere.
know, and he had a home, and he had a car, and, he speaks fluent Italian. So when I talk about a missed opportunity, that was a missed opportunity, but hopefully we get to go in the future.
Has he been back since he played?
Yes, he has.
Oh, he has?
Yep.
Okay, well, maybe one day he could take you.
Absolutely.
Now, did he have to become an Italian citizen to play?
No, so that's a great question. So there's actually Americans that actually play baseball on these European teams. But the unique part about this, and this will actually tie into my grandpa's story, is when we were doing a lot of the research, we found that with our family lineage and with our history, we are able to get my brother dual citizenship. So we were able to produce the documents. So my brother has dual citizenship. So he's an Italian citizen and he's an American citizen. The story that I was going to share about my grandfather, which was so unique, is that growing up, my dad's name was Salvatore Mazzucca. My brother is Joe Giuseppe Mazzucca, and my brother Mike was Mike Mazzucca. And I'm the Irish one. I'm Colleen, right? So my mom's from Ireland. So anyways, long story short, when we were looking up our family history, we found something so unique. My grandpa always went by Joe Mazzucca. And we were looking up the documents for the family. Nothing was coming up with Joe Mazzucca. And we're like, well, that's weird. That's his name. Come to find out, when my grandpa was going to high school in the city of Chicago, his real name was actually Italo Mazzucca. Because he was bullied, because he was treated so poorly in high school, he changed his name from Italo to Joe. And not Giuseppe, he just wanted to be called the average Joe, and he changed his name to Joe Mazzucca. So when we were trying to get my brother Italian citizenship, we came across all this documentation and paperwork of his name being Italo Mazzucca, and then he changed it to Joe Mazzucca. So I think it just shares the importance of understanding culture, values, family, history, right? Because we don't hear these stories, and just coming across this with my own personal experience with my family, it was very unique.
And which really goes, in those days, you were ashamed of it, and you changed it to a common name. And now, the new births amongst a lot of Italian Americans, it's very ethnic first names, ultra ethnic first names. You never hear Joe and Tony and Lou and Frank. It doesn't exist. So it's amazing. And you're talking about probably with your grandfather. I mean, you're talking like 80, 90 years ago, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so you see how things change. And that's wonderful with the names, but me personally, hope that it kind of live up to the name. So if you're going to name this child, Fabrizio or Massimo or all these beautiful names, and that's wonderful, instill that in them. Instill, make them aware, give them the opportunity to study the language. I'm a big fan of the language because it's so important, because language is culture and culture is language, and we have to keep that up. So, when they're young, that's the time. That's the time. And have them study Italian and have them come see cultural things and be a part of it. Very important. Maybe slightly less, no offense, baseball practices and a little more cultural stuff, because for the majority, they're done playing by sophomore year in high school. They're not like her brother Joe that would go on to become a professional baseball player.
That's correct.
And was that a good experience for your brother Joe?
Oh my gosh, the best. And so I think from that actually helped. So many people, when they know myself and they know our family, is that they know my brother Joe, because the media picked up on it. Everybody thought this is such a unique story. Again, he traveled the world. He played on Team Italy.
But he also played with a regular team in the Italian league, correct?
Absolutely,
And then he played with the national team.
Yes.
So he was one of the best players to play with the national team.
He was. And Frank knows this. He actually did a podcast with my brother. So
I interviewed her brother
Yeah,
because
he
when
did.
we met here at Triton a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and she says, yeah, my maiden name is Mazzucca. And I go, I'm going to throw it out there. I go, any relation to a Joe Mazzucca? She goes, it's my brother. I go, oh my God, I interviewed him on my podcast.
Yeah.
Because he also, he kind of is a, not tutors, but what do you call that, baseball?
Yeah. So he still gives lessons, and he has his own,
Yes.
private company that he works with, students, school. He works with everybody to give lessons.
And he was working with my neighbors, and my neighbor said, you should interview this guy, Joe Mazzucca.
Yeah.
What a great story.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, Louis Rago, from the Triton College Foundation Board, the president of the original Rago Brothers Funeral Homes. Lou, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And you too, like Peter, are majorly involved with a lot of things in the Italian community. Where's your family from in Italy?
On the Rago side of the family, my great-grandfather was from a little town called Trevigna, which is in the province of Potenza. And my mother's family, the Sorelli family, is from Salerno. And my grandfather used to say it was like Elmwood Park in Chicago. So very close towns that both of the families were from. My Grandpa Sorelli migrated here with his brother when he was 11 years old. And an interesting story, you know, in those days, in order to get into the country, when you got to Ellis Island, you had to have a sponsor. And my grandfather's sponsor was on the lapel of his jacket, and he passed everything at Ellis Island and made his way to Chicago and went to an address on Grand Avenue, and his sponsor was dead. So he and his brother had no one, and the ingenuity of those migrants, whether they be Italian or Polish, all of those Western European migrants, they somehow found a way to survive. My grandfather took a job as a water boy on the railroad, and he was very proud. He used to talk about that all of the time. He'd say he went from Chicago as far north as Wyoming, and he said, "Kid, you know, I could have been a cowboy." But he made his way back. Somehow he got a job as a tailor, and worked in an upholstery factory, and then worked his way out of the poultry factory and worked as a tailor in a men's clothing store. I don't know how he wound up in the food business, but my grandfather started a little grocery store in our old neighborhood called The Patch. The Patch was relatively from Grand Avenue to Chicago Avenue and from California to Western. It was a little patch of Italians. And my grandfather started a little grocery store there, and by the time he passed away, his store was making 4,000 pounds of Italian beef a week and servicing about 80 beef stands throughout Cook County. I could tell you stories about him for the rest of the hour, but I just wanted to impress upon everybody here. We're here to talk about Italian heritage. And Italians, you know, are famous for loving their culture and their heritage, and rightfully so. I don't think that there is another Western European group of migrants who have contributed any more than the Italian-American legacy, starting from Columbus to Americus Vespucci to Giovanni Caboto, which when we were kids, we didn't know he was Italian. And in school, he was John Cabot. But Giovanni Caboto was a great explorer and contributed so much to the founding of the Americas. And so the Western European influence, the Italian influence on the Americas as we know them today is, we could spend an hour to 2 hours just mentioning names of those people who have contributed and made our life as we know it today so much easier. Italians love their culture. I love my culture and my heritage. But what's best about Italian Americans is while we love and respect and our culture and heritage, we respect everybody else's. And I think that's a great tribute to us. My grandpa used to say, "Kid, everybody's welcome at our table," and he was so true. That was so true, and our family has lived our lives around that. While we continue to be active in the Italian American community, we welcome everyone to sit with us at our table and learn and celebrate their culture and history. I don't know what else to tell you. I'm the luckiest guy you know. My grandpa Rago started a funeral home in 1909 and built the first funeral home ever built in the city of Chicago in 1917. And I've been fortunate enough to be the third generation running that business, and I've been more fortunate because now I have 2 grandchildren in the business with me. So we're into our 5th generation, and I'm so proud of that. My grandfather and my father, I hope, are sitting on the cloud somewhere, smiling down upon us.
Is that original location still
We're
intact?
still there. I lived at the original location.
And that's
my
where?
grandfather's apartment. I live in, and that's at 624 North on Western Avenue. Yeah.
Wow.
But I have to tell you a quick story about my grandpa Sorelli. He was so proud of our family. He was so successful, but he didn't believe in medical insurance. And in his 70s, he became ill, wound up in the hospital at Oak Park Hospital in a 6-bed ward because he had no insurance. And so I went to see him, and fortunately, there were only 2 people in the ward. There was a fella across the way, 3 beds there, and 1 guy there, and my grandfather on this side. And the poor fella on the other side was on oxygen. There was a priest there, and his wife was sitting there saying a rosary. And my grandfather, he was my biggest plugger, which was unfortunate at times, because I leaned over and I said, "Grandpa, how are you doing?" And he said, "Kid, I'm okay. But that guy over there, hey lady, this is my grandson, Louis Rago, Undertaker." And I said, "Grandpa, you can't do that." He said, "Kid, she's going to need one. Might as well be you." And I left. But that's our heritage. Our families are our families. We boast about our children. We support our children and our grandchildren, and we stay together. Unfortunately, there's one big thing that we miss, and that is when we were all kids, we lived in a neighborhood where we were 2 blocks, 20 feet away from our grandparents, 15 feet away from our aunts and uncles. Everybody in the neighborhood knew everybody, and we kind of got away from that. In order to try to assimilate, we moved out. Now, when I was a kid and we lived next door to my grandparents, my mother and father spoke Italian to my grandpa Sorelli and my grandma Sorelli. And we would say, "Grandpa, teach us Italian." And he'd say, "Kid, you're an American. You speak English." And 25 years later, when I had my children and I would go to see my grandfather every day, all of a sudden, it was, "Kid, these kids should be bilingual." Because, we all learned that America is not a great melting pot. America is a great mosaic of different cultures and different heritages that make this so great. And we should learn to celebrate all of that. And I get a little choked up because I know from where we came, and I just think we should all be proud of who we are and where we came from. And I thank you for your time. I'm so proud and honored that Maryann invited me to be a guest on this panel, and I'm honored to be with the rest of these folks. God bless you. If you want to, I don't want to take away from, but we really should celebrate America's. That same grandfather, when he, on his 50th wedding anniversary, I gave him 2 tickets to go back to Italy because he had never been back there. And I said, "Take Grandma there and go." And he said, No, I don't want to go. I said, "Grandpa, you're so proud of your heritage, and why don't you want to go?" He said, "Kid, all I remember there is poverty. This is the best country in the world. And so let's remember where we live. And thank you for your time. I hope I didn't take up too much time."
And with all these stories, it makes me think, and we all know the Renaissance men in the 1500s, but that generation, the grandfathers, the great-grandfathers, they were all I'm amazed by them. They were all like Renaissance men. They all knew how to do things. He was a butcher. He was in this business. He was in that business. He was a tailor. I don't know how to do one thing. They knew how to do 6 things. But I think the common thing was they were hungry. They were hungry to learn, and they were hungry to survive. And, unfortunately or fortunately, times are good. We're all, doing well. And I think we lose that. We lose that hunger. And that was a great generation of just genuine, hardworking, respectful people that you know, when they say came from nothing and made something of it, it's so true. It's so true, too. I tip my hat to all that generation because they were just amazing, amazing people. They were not famous people. We're not going to read about them in books, but they were incredible, extraordinary people. What do we say? God made a lot of ordinary people, but ordinary people do extraordinary things every day, and that generation did. So God bless them. We have, I believe, about 5 minutes, Tina? Okay, is there anybody in the audience that might have a question for somebody up here, or just a question in general? No? Okay. Anybody on the panel like to say
Hey, Lou,
something, please?
No customers today.
No, God forbid.
Okay.
No, God forbid. That's a terrible way to be remembered, by the way.
Maryann?
For those of you who are interested, if you really want to know more about our heritage, there is a great organization based on the East Coast. It's called the Italics. And I would suggest to you that you go online because they put out a monthly bulletin with history and facts about our culture presently going on and a great history of those men and women who made us what we are today. The press never wants to dwell on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. They're called the Italic Institute of America, Floral Park, New York, and they're like, believe me when I say, and I say this with a lot of pride and enthusiasm and knowledge, we are way beyond ravioli and other things, okay? And this group out there, they study all that. They bring it to light, the classical Italy. It is a tremendous group. The placemats on your seats are from the Italic Institute of America. That's just the beginning of things. Yes, ma'am.
So I do have a question. Ravioli has on it.
Yes.
I'd like to know from each one of you, what's your favorite memory of a dish? Be it from your grandmother, your grandfather,
Oh, that's easy.
and stuff. So each one of you, I'd like to know what you can share about that.
All right, I'll jump on mine, okay? I grew up in a house where every Sunday my mom made a pot of sauce. I know that was in this thing, sauce, gravy. It's actually zugo, okay? It's none of the above, it's zugo. But I would watch my grandma for the holidays make a Sicilian pizza that was called sfingiuni. To this day, we follow that recipe to a T. I have her mixing bowl and I have her baking pans. And if you don't use those, it won't taste the same. So for me, my favorite Italian dish is my grandma's sfingiuni.
My favorite's the gravy. I call it gravy. I make Sunday sauce for my family, and then I jar it, and I do it every fall, and I do it with neck bones. That's why we call it gravy. So red marinara sauce, if you're just making it with tomatoes, we call that sauce. And you just add a little garlic and basil. But if we cook it with the meat and we put the neck bones in it, and then we have the neck bones marinate, and then I take the neck bones out, and there's meat in it, and there's carrots and Parmesan and a bunch of other good stuff. But that's our gravy, and that's my favorite. I follow my family's recipe, and then I just add in a little extra stuff sometimes when I think it needs it, but we'll jar it out and we'll give it to our family, and everybody gets really excited for it. It's a good fall and winter Sunday dinner. So,
Maryann?
Well, actually, our family calls it gravy. I don't know if that's a little bit controversial, but that's what we call it. My best dish is probably cooking with my mom. She's right here in the front row. That's probably her pasta is probably my favorite dish. Making gravy with her on Sundays, and I remember cooking with my grandmothers, just making like pasta dishes and different dinners like that. That's probably my favorite.
Okay. Tony?
I'm a gravy guy also. And my favorite's a simple dish called pasta fazool. It's just the beans and macaroni.
Colleen?
So it's my Aunt Marie's lasagna, and when my family, we do not order lasagna at a restaurant. We do not eat anybody else's lasagna. It's only my Aunt Marie, and nobody has mastered it yet in my family. And every time somebody makes it, we're always like, no, Aunt Marie's is better. So Aunt Marie's lasagna.
Okay, I don't have anything specific, but just in general, especially with my wife. My wife was born in Italy, in Calabria, and studied here at Triton College. And this library was a deciding factor in us being together after 32 years of marriage. That's a really long story. But we still, to this day, we jar tomatoes every year. We make wine every year. We make soppressata. We just jarred giardiniera that we grew the peppers in the garden. We jarred eggplants. we try to do these things, and I'll tell you something. It used to be it was cheaper. It's not cheaper. Okay, believe me, the grapes, I could have bought wine for less. But the beauty is, it's you keep this going. It's a tradition. It's also, too, you know what's going in it, okay? But it's just that tradition. It's a wonderful, beautiful thing, and we just, really strive to keep it going. So, and I'm really proud of that, and I hope we keep it going forever. Maryann, you wanted, oh, I'm sorry, Lou. I'm sorry.
Real quick, I have two, okay? One is the traditional Sunday dinner at our house, like hers. We must have had pasta 3 times a week because it was so inexpensive to make. But on Sundays, our mothers and our grandmothers put neck bones in the gravy, okay? And because it was the least expensive thing you could buy at the grocery store was neck bones, and it gave it a flavor. Now, 25 years ago, I formed an organization called the Italian American Human Relations Foundation. And about 6 times a year on a Sunday afternoon, we have a traditional pasta and neck bone dinner where you can come and listen to some live entertainment, and we showcase entertainment, not only Italian-American entertainment, but all different ones. We want to celebrate everybody's ethnicity and heritage through the performing arts. So that's my first. But our biggest memory, Frank, I'm sure everybody up here, but on the holidays, it was a big thing because my grandmother and my mother would make ravioli for Easter and for Christmas and for Thanksgiving. And ravioli, there was nothing like walking into your bedroom and seeing a whole bed covered with newspaper and fresh ravioli on there. They would make it, and it was just a great sight. Those are things that we should cherish, and I do. And again, I thank you for your time, Frank.
Thank you to the panel. Thank you to Triton College. Thank you all for being here. This was a very, very enjoyable event. Thank you.